Hello and welcome back to What's Mili Making, where I'm Mili, and this is the space where I talk about the past, present, and future of my making, mostly knitting. Today's video is Knitting Podcast episode 18. It has been a really long time since I've recorded a knitting podcast, so instead of trying to cover everything that I've worked on since my last podcast, I'm instead just going to be focusing on everything that I've knit so far in 2026, which I think is a little bit less than in previous years. But you know what? It's okay because I've genuinely enjoyed making everything that I've made, and everything that I've made has already gotten a ton of wear. I've been just trying to be a little bit more intentional with my knitting. That really has nothing to do with the speed or volume of my knitting, but just picking projects that I'm going to enjoy making and will work with other items in my wardrobe. If it is your first time here, I follow a very traditional knitting podcast formula. So I'll start off with my finished objects, where I'll talk about the pattern and the yarn combination and what it cost me. Then I'll have some whips, and I don't have any yarn acquisitions because one of my goals this year was to go in an entire quarter without purchasing yarn. And it is April, so I have succeeded in that. I don't know when my next yarn purchase will be, maybe later this month because it is the New Jersey Wool Walk. But on the other hand, I actually think I have not really had that temptation to purchase new yarn. I've had a little bit of a temptation, but not too big of a temptation because I already have so much yarn in stash. But that's not the point of this video. So instead of acquisitions, maybe I'll talk a little bit about some of my future and upcoming knitting plans. So without further ado, let's just jump into finished objects. So far, I have finished 2 sweaters this year. Let me grab the first one. So the first sweater that I finished, I always have to look at the neckline on these raglans to figure out which is the front. Because if you put in short rows, the front usually has a little bit of that curve. So this is the classic sweater by Espace Tricot. As you've probably already realized, this is your classic everyday top-down raglan. It's knit at a 21 stitch gauge. I really didn't do any modifications to this pattern, or very, very minimal. I basically knitted to pattern. The number one modification I did is the pattern has you cast on for ribbing with a tubular cast on, and I skipped that for 2 main reasons. Number one, I loathe doing a tubular cast on. I find it to be very finicky and I'm not good at it. Only tubular cast on I will do. Well, actually, let me rewind a little bit. I don't mind doing it for a button band when it's just a few stitches, but when it's this many stitches, I inevitably mess it up. If you are like me and you also struggle with the tubular cast on, I will recommend the provisional tubular cast on with a crochet hook. I find that even though it is a mouthful, even though it does take a few extra steps, I find that to be the easiest tubular cast on. But all that said, that's a lot of work, and I did not want to do that for this very basic project. And that goes to my second reasoning for not starting off directly with the cast on, is that I actually like casting on directly for the stockinette body because, I don't have to knit ribbing, my least favorite part of a plain sweater project. I can just get started in the stockinette, and I will later pick up stitches, and basically that way you have a seam in the neckline, and anywhere you have a seam, you are adding stability to your garment, and it will help prevent the sweater from stretching out over time and just improve the integrity of your neckline. So that is my little spiel on why I mostly never directly cast on for ribbing when I'm knitting these top-down sweaters. And I think that's really the only modification I made. One thing I really like about the sweater is I like the way that the increases are done. So you are doing KFB increases, which is knit front back increases, which I actually think it's kind of an underrated increase because it looks really nice and clean. And for the most part, I am pretty good at knowing when I knit one left and knit one right. It's not that I confuse them, it's just sometimes I forget which one I'm supposed to be doing, and that is more my confusion. But the beauty of a KFB increase is that it's literally always the same. It doesn't matter if you're on the left side of a stitch or right side of the stitch, it's all the same. It's just KFB. And on the purl side, it's just PFB, purl front and back. So it's a very easy and beginner friendly increase, making this, I think, overall a very beginner friendly sweater pattern. So yeah, that is the pattern. I will say, so I downloaded this pattern when it was for free. I think now you have to purchase it. However, so this pattern is published by Espace Tricot, and I think they've gone through multiple owners at this point. And I think one of the previous owners of Especially Co. is currently the owner of Sonder Yarn Co. And if you go under the Sonder Yarn Co. Ravelry page, I will like write the name of the pattern on the screen because I don't remember it off the top of my head. Basically, Sonder Yarn Co. has a very similar pattern to this. It is a top-down raglan. I believe it uses the KFB increases. It has like the same stitch counts and same finished like dimensions. There's only two major differences. Is one, it uses 2x2 ribbing, and number two, it uses two color stripes, like large block stripes. But that's literally like the easiest modification you can make if you want to basically make the classic sweater. You just sub the 2x2 rib for a 1x1 rib, and you can remove these stripes, and you have basically the currently free version of this pattern. Yeah, I don't really think I have anything else to say about the pattern. It was a very straightforward knit. As far as the yarn combination goes, I actually was able to use the recommended yarn, which almost never happens for me. I really like picking out yarn for a sweater pattern and like figuring out the substitutions. It's actually like one of my favorite parts of planning for a sweater. However, this yarn was already in my stash, and it was deep stash because I did cast on, it's that petite knit blouse. I can't remember the name of it. Is it like the Eve blouse or whatever? I'll insert like a picture and name of this pattern, but this pattern was such a beast to knit. I literally only made it through like the collar and the beginning of the yoke, and the collar on that sweater ate up so much yarn. When I frogged that collar, it made up like almost the entire yoke of this sweater. So that's how much yarn that collar consumed, which is kind of wild to me. And I remember crying when I cast on that sweater because it uses like, I think it's like the Turkish cast on or something like that. It's a really terrible cast on that I absolutely hate doing. And it's one of those cast on similar to like the tubular cast on. I'm going on so many side tangents, but it is what it is. That's what you're here for, right? What was I saying? It's similar to the tubular cast on in that when I use this cast on for like the toe of a sock, if you're knitting a toe up sock, it's one of the recommended cast ons. It's not that bad because it's only a few stitches. However, in this petite knit pattern, I had to cast on like, I don't know, like 100 stitches or something like that. And I remember I just kept messing up and I eventually cried. But after I cried it out, I did get it done. It was all for naught because I ended up frogging it 3 years later. Did I even tell you what the yarn combination is? I don't think so. The yarn combination is Isier Alpaca 2, followed with a strand of Isier Silk Mohair. The Alpaca 2 is a light fingering weight yarn. It's 50% merino, 50% alpaca. I think they actually might have renamed it. And then the silk mohair is your like standard silk mohair. I think it's 75% mohair, 25% silk. One thing I was surprised, so I will write down the cost breakdown for the sweater for me on the screen. I purchased this yarn several years ago. I think like 3 or 4 years ago at this point. Yeah, I think actually like 4 years ago at this point. So it's like some of the earliest yarn I purchased. I think I purchased it during the New Jersey Wool Walk, so I did get it at I want to say 15% discount. It'll be on the screen. One thing I'm surprised is that with all the tariffs and inflation and everything, I feel like this yarn, like the price has stayed pretty much the same. I don't think it's increased that much, or if it has, it's only increased within like the last few months, I believe, because when I was looking at this yarn last year, I remember I was like, wow, I'm kind of surprised that the price is exactly the same. I would absolutely use these yarns again. Both of them have a really lovely hand feel. The Alpaca 2, I don't really knit with a lot of light fingering weight yarn, but I think because it does have that 50% alpaca content, it blooms really nicely. Like it has a natural halo to it. And then the Isier Silk Mohair is one of my favorite silk mohairs of all time. I think the only silk mohair I like more than the Isier is the Rowan silk mohair. Both of them are really soft. They don't shed a ton compared to other silk mohairs, and they have a great color range. I think the Rowan is just a touch softer, and it truly has like the best color range of any silk mohair that I've seen. Like if you can imagine the color, they probably have it. It is a literal perfect gradient of colors. The Rowan one is a little bit pricier than the Isier silk mohair though. But overall, really enjoy the pattern, really enjoy the yarn. I would absolutely use them both again, and I would comfortably recommend both the pattern and the yarn. I think was it this sweater pattern? No, it's the next sweater pattern that I'll talk about needle size when I talk about this pattern. Let me grab the next sweater. My next and only other finished sweater is the Hannah Sweater O-Neck by Petite Knit. This is another top-down sweater, but this one has a drop shoulder and the back is shaped with increases, so you get this like really nice line. I don't know why, I really like that as like a visual detail. I initially picked this sweater because this line was like very reminiscent of my favorite things knitwear sweater number 14, which I wear a ton. I also just like the way that the shaping is done in the front of the neckline. And I feel like this is not a very popular petite knit pattern, but I really like the way that it fits. I think it fits really nicely. I did go down, I think, either 2 or 3 sizes in this because as written it has a ton of positive ease and I just didn't want that much positive ease. And I think I did good picking this size because I really like the way that it fits in my shoulders and like the yoke in general. What else is there to say about the sweater pattern? This actually might be my favorite like basic stockinette sweater pattern that I've knit. Previously, I would have said my favorite is My Favorite Things Knitwear sweater number 23, which I have knit thrice at this point, and it does have like similar construction to this. I think the difference between that and this is honestly like a pretty standard drop shoulder. There is a little bit of shaping, like I said, in the back shoulder, so like the drop shoulder doesn't start at your elbow or anything like that, compared to some sweaters where it's like literally just a rectangle with no shaping. But the sweater number 23 has even more shaping because you are doing some shaping in your underarm before you join the body in the round, and then you also have a sleeve cap in your sleeve, so you're working short row so that that sleeve starts up a little bit higher. I think the reason why I like this a little bit better is just like the way that it sits on me. I've noticed in my sweater number 23s, it really depends on the yarn combination as well, because I knit it with 3 very different yarns, but I noticed with my lighter yarn combinations, the front has a tendency to rise up, which honestly I should probably start adding bust darts into my sweaters for that reason, but that is a whole other conversation. And I feel like on this one, it still rises up like a little bit because that's just like the reality of having boobs and not adding in bust shaping, but it does not rise up as much. And yeah, I think just like the yoke fits me really nicely. So if you're thinking of knitting this sweater, I personally would give it a go ahead. I really like the shaping, and I think it's just like a clean classic sweater. I mean, that's like all petite knits patterns. As far as the yarn combination goes, this is one of my favorite yarn combinations to knit with and wear. I held a single strand of Nutidin, which is a unspun yarn, held with a single strand of Knitting for Olive silk mohair. And again, I will write the project cost on the screen. Unlike the Izzier, Nutidin is definitely one of those yarns that got hit heavy with the tariffs, and I was a little bit of a Nutidin hoarder because I was like, I think like a year and a half where I was a Nutidin Patreon, and if you're a Patreon you got like early access to all their drops, and I think this was like in the height of Nutidin, so if you weren't like in the Patreon, sometimes like the colors would sell out. So I would literally just be buying Nutidin every single month. Like I would just buy like at least a sweater quantity every single month. And it was quite affordable back then. I think with shipping, I could get a sweater quantity or like a 300 gram bag for around $50. Whereas now I'm not even sure how their shipping works with the whole tariff situation. I do know that the Woolly Thistle had some of their yarn over the winter. Bug in my window that was bothering me. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I know the Woolly Thistle had some of their yarn over the winter. I don't know how regularly they're going to be keeping it in stock, but I think it was like $80 or $90 at that point, plus you would have to pay for shipping. So definitely I feel bad that like one of these smaller yarn producers got hit so hard with the tariffs, but I do feel lucky that I do already have so much of it in stash. That said, like if I didn't have any in stash, I think I would still consider splurging on it because it is like some of my favorite yarn to knit with and to wear because it's super lightweight. The colors are gorgeous. Like I don't know how much it's captured on camera, but because they blend like different colors of wool together. Like all their colors have some depth to them. Like they're never flat single colors. They always have like speckles of other stuff in it. Like this is green, but there's speckles of like orange and brown and like a goldenish color in it, and it's really pretty in my opinion. And holding it with a single strand of silk mohair, you can really bring out like whichever color you want to highlight. So I held it with the Knitting for All of Silk Mohair and Dusty Artichoke. It's like that classic like light green. Is it like a mossy green? It almost reminds me of the color of lichen. It's like a lichen green. And I held that with the Newt knit to make this sweater. Really enjoy both of these yarns, and I would repurchase them again, knit with them again, and make this sweater again. I actually think it would be interesting to make this sweater again and add in some bust darts, but that's maybe like a fall project. It's too warm, I think, at this point to be knitting another sweater like this. So that is that. I think I only have one other finished object. I have knit 3 hats this year, but I only have one of them with me. One other one is in my car, and then the last one was a gift knit, but I do have pictures of it, so I will insert that. This is a free pattern from Pearl Soho. It's just a basic 2x2 ribbed hat. I actually cast this on like last fall and I completely forgot about it, and then I just found it when I was like reorganizing my yarn. I found it in a lone project bag, so I threw it in my purse, and it was just like my on-the-go project for like 2 or 3 weeks, if even that long, to get it done. So I ultimately, so usually when I knit 2x2 hats, I knit this free pattern by Anne Gagnon, and it has the same exact shaping as Petite Knit's Hipster Hat, I believe is the name. It's the one that's the 2x2 rib. However, this time I was like, oh, let me try something new. And I do kind of regret trying something new. So the something new I tried is the Pearl Soho watch cap hat. I'm gonna try to stand a little closer to see if you can see the shaping, because it is black yarn. So I like the way that the shaping looks. It's kind of like slanted. If this is not visible on camera, maybe I'll try like editing the footage or inserting pictures, or I'll just use their pictures. But I do like the way the shaping looks theoretically. However, when it's all said and done, it's so freaking pointy. Like, I do not like how pointy it is. It's giving dunce cap. I've seen people on Reddit call it like, not this specific hat pattern, but the pointy tipped hats. I've seen people call it like condom tip hats, and I honestly just cannot unsee it. So I have not worn this, I've not blocked it. I do think when I eventually block it, I'm going to have to wet block it over a balloon to really get it to round out, because I do not want the pointy tip hat. I don't want it. I don't like that. I want it to be flat. So yeah, I probably would not knit this hat pattern again, just because I don't like the pointiness. Actually, wait. I will reserve judgment until I block it. Maybe I'll block it and I'll really like it. So TBD on how I like it after blocking. The instructions are really easy to follow, and it does come in a great number of sizes. So if you don't mind the pointiness, I would say give it a go. I think another thing for me to try, maybe if I wanted to knit this hat again, is to basically decrease at a quicker rate to make it less pointy. And then the yarn that I use for this is a really nice affordable yarn. However, I don't really know if I can purchase it anymore. It's the Circulo, I don't even remember the name. It's Circulo Brazilian Merino, something like that. It's 100% superwash merino. It was a very affordable yarn. The 100-gram skein I think was under $15, and yardage wise you get over 300 yards, which usually I would think that would be like a sport weight, but honestly I think it does knit up like pretty easily at a DK8 gauge. Like, it's not an overly thin yarn, and because I haven't blocked it yet and it's superwash, I'm assuming it's going to grow as well. The yarn store that I bought it at no longer carries it, and I haven't seen it at any other yarn store, so I'm not 100% sure where you could purchase it. Maybe like the Circulo website, or if you're interested in it, you can always go on Ravelry, and they'll usually list like what the available retailers are. So that is this hat. Then the next hat that I knit, or I might have knit that before this hat, I don't remember the timeline of things. The other hat that I knit for myself this winter is the Daily Beanie by Is Knits. This is another free pattern, and I really liked this pattern as well. It also comes in a variety of sizes. I always appreciate when hats come in a variety of sizes. I don't mind if free hat patterns come only in one size, but I don't really want to purchase a hat pattern if it only comes in one size, because then I have to do extra math, and like, what's the point of purchasing it if I have to do the math myself when there's like a bajillion free patterns available. The reason I really like this pattern, one, I like the way that the crown shaping is done. The crown shaping is all with the knit two togethers, and as somebody, like my SSKs, no matter what modification I try doing them, I know people have like all sorts of tips and tricks to neaten up your SSKs, and they do for me to a degree, but they still never look good as my knit two togethers. And in this hat pattern, it's all knit two together, so my increases look better than usual. What else did I like? Oh, I also like that the designer gives you yarn recommendations. So this is basically a bulky weight hat pattern, and you could use a single stranded bulky weight, which is what I did because I already had it in stash, but you could also combine like other scraps of yarn that you have in your stash, and because you are knitting it at a bulky weight gauge, the amount of yardage you need isn't a lot. So this is the problem of drinking Diet Coke before recording. I'm getting some burps. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so oftentimes, like if you have 100 yards of fingering weight yarn or 100 yards of mohair, that's not a ton of yarn. So you're like, what can I do with that? You can hold it with other yarns and make this beanie. And I like that the designer just gives you like different yarn combinations you could try out to hit gauge and mix and match and make the hat. And I really, really like the pattern photos as well, because you can see like how different yarn combinations could look together, and maybe you could get inspired by that. I am kind of sad that I cannot wear mohair hats. Like it just irritates my forehead, and like the skin on my face is already the most sensitive, and yeah, mohair hats are a no for me, but I love the way they look. Like the pattern photos are honestly like what called me to this pattern in the first place, because I really like the scrappy version that the designer has made. Alas, it is not meant to be for me because I just can't wear fluffy yarns around my face. It just irritates me and my skin. Okay, that's it for me. And then I also have 3 other gift knits. So since I'm on the topic of hats, let's talk about the other hat that I knit. It is I always confuse the number of this hat. I always want to say like 1998, but I know it's not 1998. It is the 1898 hat by Christine Burns, and this is yet another free pattern. I've really been on a free pattern roll. I think in 2024, I realized how much I was spending on patterns and how many of them I was not knitting. So in 2025, I didn't give myself a strict budget per se for patterns, but my goal was to knit every pattern that I purchased. So until I was at the point where I was going to cast on the project, I would not purchase the pattern. And before purchasing a pattern, I would look at what's in my library, what is available for free, and then I would purchase a pattern. And I think overall, I only ended up purchasing 1 pattern that I did not make. So that was pretty great. My 2026 record has not been as good. Out of the 3 patterns that I've purchased so far, I've only knit the Hannah sweater, but it is what it is. One of the patterns that I did not knit was the Resist Ice hat, so I'm not going to call that a loss because at least the money went to a good cause. That was actually kind of why I knit that daily beanie, because I wanted to take part in knitting a hat for like supporting immigrants' rights and resisting ice and all that, but it was a blizzard weekend when it happened, and I was just spending so much time thinking about what red yarn I could go out and purchase, and it was just like completely missing the point, especially when I already had red yarn in stash. Oh, I didn't even talk about the yarn that I used. So yeah, basically I just donated the money that I would have spent on new yarn, and I used red yarn I already had in stash. Moral of the story is, you don't always need to purchase new yarn to take part in community events. Knitting is so modifiable and so personal. Use what you have. Or don't. I mean, if you're purchasing yarn from your local yarn store, that's also great because you are supporting your local community. And this is yet another tangent. Okay, the yarn that I used was This is why I need to look at my notes because I don't remember everything off the top of my head because it's been so long. Oh no, Quinson Co. Puffin is the yarn that I use. It is a super bulky weight yarn. And this is, again, yarn that was deep stash. I actually have a lot more of this yarn in stash because I have a sweater quantity of it. And this is one of the yarns that definitely got hit hard by inflation because when I purchased this 4 years ago, this yarn was $12 and now I believe it is over $20 a skein the last time I looked at it. No, it is exactly $20. Okay, my throat has been cleared. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I don't personally, I think I would still purchase it at a $20 price point because that's still like relatively affordable for my personal budget. Plus, I like that it is made with 100% American wool fleece. So I like that it is a relatively local yarn. A lot of times with single ply yarns, they tend to pill very easily because they're single ply. But this yarn is slightly felted, like it comes to you slightly felted, and I have not found it to pill. And I've worn my red hat a ton, and I don't really think I've gotten any pilling so far. Not that hats tend to pill a ton in like my personal experience. I can't say I know how it would react in a garment because I did not finish the garment that I purchased the yarn for. But as far as a hat goes, it does not pill. Yeah, on I'm also seeing on their website that they have a speckled version of this yarn, which is quite cute. I'm a sucker for like a tweed yarn. Okay, so that's that hat. Let me jump back to the other project I had started to talk about. And that project was the 1898 hat by Christine Burns, which is another free pattern. This pattern I think has such clever construction. So you start off knitting the brim of the hat, which is knit flat in garter stitch. However, you then work short rows in such a way that it basically manipulates the fabric from like a flat 2D piece of fabric into a 3D piece of fabric, and those like short row humps that you create ultimately go on to become ear flaps. And yeah, it's just such a clever construction in my opinion. Like I've never done anything knit that way. It kind of reminds me of the Romanesco bag, which I have not knit, but just from like looking at it, I'm assuming that like the way that the 3D construction is created is probably also through the use of short rows or another similar technique. But yeah, I think it's a really clever construction. And after you do that, you're supposed to knit, basically fold that garter rim together, and you pick up and knit two together around the edge, and then you knit the crown. However, I was knitting this for my dad and he really wanted a double lined hat. So if you follow the instructions for the pattern, the brim is already going to be double lined because you are folding that garter brim in half. However, because my dad wanted a fully double lined hat, what I did is instead of knitting two together, like knitting the two edges together, I only picked up the stitches for like one edge of the brim and I knit up and I knit the crown, and then I picked up the stitches for the outer brim of the hat and I knit up and I knit a second crown. So basically, if you have ever knit the Musselburgh hat and you have kind of like that long like sausage tube, that was essentially what the shape of this hat ended up being as well. And then when I was weaving in the ends, I just kind of like wove them together so that they would not come apart, and I was able to weave in my ends in such a way that technically the hat is reversible, which is pretty cool. I actually think one side is considerably more ugly than the other because I ran out of the yarn that I was using, but oddly enough my dad actually likes the uglier side, so what can you say? Taste is personal. So the main color that I used for this, or the main yarn that I used for this, is the Murky Depths MCN DK base, and the color name was For Beatrice. However, I ran out of yarn on like the second crown, so then I used Rowan Alpaca Soft DK, which is some of the softest yarn that I've ever used. This yarn, the Murky Depths yarn, I bought last year during the New York City yarn crawl, but the Rowan yarn is also deep stashed, also from 4 years ago. Something about my winter knitting, I don't know, I was just reaching for my deep stash yarns. Such a nice and soft yarn, and considering how soft it was, it doesn't pill a ton because I have made two gift knits. I made two gift knits with them. with it, and they have held up nicely so far from what I've heard from the recipients and what I've seen myself when they wear the item. So yeah, I would totally recommend that yarn because like I said, it's so soft. And yeah, I just ended up helically knitting it with the hand-dyed yarn to make up the inner crown of the hat, or what my dad wears as the outer crown because he likes that side. I don't know. Couldn't be me. And then the last gift knit was just a pair of vanilla socks. I don't really have anything to say because they're just vanilla socks. Oh, I do have something to say. Whenever I knit vanilla socks, I always link them to the I'm So Basic Socks pattern by Summerly Knits. I no longer follow the pattern because I just know how to knit socks like off the top of my head, but that pattern I think is the best learning resource if you want to learn how to knit socks. It has a comprehensive pattern, it has photos in the pattern, and there is also a video tutorial you can follow along on, and it is all free, and it also comes in a bunch of sizes. I don't know if it goes out to kid sizes, but it does have a full range of adult sizes. So that's on the sock pattern. Like I said, I didn't follow the sock pattern. Like I did something different for the ribbing. I think I did a contrast heel and toe, and yeah, but that I guess is where I learned how to knit socks. So whenever I knit vanilla socks, I just tag it to that pattern. As for the yarn that I used, it was my first time knitting with Lang Jowl. I don't know how to pronounce it. So my new method for knitting socks is what I call fake 2 at a time socks, and I have a pair of socks on the needle so I can show you what I mean. But basically that requires me, if I'm only knitting from one ball of yarn, it requires me to split the ball in half, and I was shocked. I was gagged. I was gagged, gooped. I don't know. Gabba gabba doo. What am I saying? Let's go back to shocked. I was shocked to find out that the yarn ball was less than 50 grams. It is in fact 45 grams. And when I figured that out, I went on Ravelry and it does say 45 grams, but I could have swore. I always thought it was 50 grams. I guess because it comes with that little like reinforcement thread, that's why it is only 45 grams. That said, I had more than enough yarn to finish up the socks because I used a contrast color for my heels and toes, and also the sock wasn't super long to begin with. As far as like the knitting experience of the sock, I think it's like pretty comparable to other similar sock yarns. The heel and toe of the sock, I use Sandisgarn Sisu. And I remember when I first started knitting, the first 2 sock yarns I tried were Filcolana Arwetta and Sandisgarn Sisu, and both of them were so terrible for me to knit with. And I think it's because my gauge was really tight. I kept splitting the yarn and it was a little bit nightmarish. And that is why I ended up liking hand-dyed yarns more, because they had a higher ply and they tended to be more tightly spun, I think is the correct terminology. But now that I am a much more comfortable sock knitter and my gauge is not so tight that I'm strangling the yarn, I really don't have any problem using those sock yarns, and I couldn't really see any discernible difference between the Lang Jowl that I feel like a lot of people really recommend that yarn, but I just didn't see anything special about it like compared to other commercial sock yarn that I've tried, like the Sandisgarn and the Filcolana. Yeah, I think those are like the 2 comparable sock yarns, I would say, because the other ones I've tried, like Regia and Patons, those do feel a little hardier in my opinion. So I think that is everything under, oh no, I have one more finished object. That was also a gift knit, and it was this cowl following a free pattern from Pearl Soho. I never really thought I would be one for cowls, but I gift knit 2 cowls and the recipients really like them. They're really usable, so I think I have to knit myself a cowl for next fall/winter. This Pearl Soho pattern is like really easy to follow. It's very basic. It's basically a 5x1 rib, and I used leftover yarn for this, so my project cost for this was $0. Actually, the blue yarn that I used for this, I think this is like my 3rd or 4th project with this yarn. So this project and the previous cowl that I knit one for my brother for Christmas, also helical knitting, really got me into helical knitting. Like, I love the look of 1x1 stripes. They're really like meditative to knit, and it's definitely like in my brain for upcoming projects in 2026. And actually one of my current whips is helically knit. Alas, my whip is very low contrast helical knitting, and that kind of seems like the perfect segue to just start talking about whips, and I can grab that whip. Okay, so this whip doesn't look like much because it's self-drafted, which means I've had to frog it and recast it on multiple times. But the plan is to have a top-down raglan where I'm working the neckline shaping flat, because I think that's just easier when you are knitting colorwork or like doing something with stripes. It's just easier to do it flat rather than trying to like do short row shaping with the floats and stuff. It's very annoying and finicky in my opinion. It's just worth it to do it flat. After I make this version, which is very, very low contrast, basically holding 2 strands of mohair as one color and then a strand of lace weight yarn and a strand of mohair for the other color. Once I figure out like the numbers and stuff, I want to make a like higher contrast version using all sorts of yarn scraps. But yeah, I just really like helical knitting, and I feel like it's kind of underrated. Like I don't really see people doing it outside of like blending in hand-dyed yarns, but I think it could be a design element in and of itself. So yeah, there's not really much to say about this project because like I said, it is very much barely in the works. And the yarn that I'm using, the mohair, is hand-dyed from a local New Jersey yarn store, Wool Bearers. I've actually never been to their store, but they used to exhibit at VKL, Folk Knitting Live, and that is where I purchased it. And then the lace weight yarn is La Bien-Aimée Helix, which has, it's a 100-gram ball and it has like over 700 yards of yarn. And that was also kind of why I decided to do the helical knitting, because I didn't really want to purchase another ball of yarn. So I'm going to see if I can get a whole sweater out of that 700 and something yard skein of yarn, because technically I'm only using it on every other row because of the helical knitting. And if you haven't done helical knitting before, I totally recommend looking up a tutorial. I really like the one by Brooklyn Tweed because you can see how easy it is, and it creates jogless stripes in the round, only 1 row stripes, and there's no floats. So it's really great. It's a really great technique in my opinion. So yeah, that is this whip. Initially I had wanted to use this boucle yarn also as a stripe, but it just wasn't coming out the way that I wanted to. So I just have 2 balls of this La Bien-Aimée boucle yarn that I don't really know what to do with. I might just eventually fall for the tiny shawl trend. It's kind of funny because I bought this because boucle was super trendy, and I learned that boucle is not for me, sadly. And then the tiny shawl trend is also trendy. So I guess we'll see if that is for me, because I didn't think it was, but maybe I need to knit one for myself and try it out. I didn't know that boucle was not for me until I bought some boucle and I tried knitting with it. And I realized, yeah, I don't like it. Other sweater that I have on my needles has a lot more progress. So this is, let me pull out the sleeve here. This is the Wilbur sweater by Sandisgarn. It is an all over cabled sweater. It's a top down raglan, and you start off the sweater flat. Like I said, I think there's something to be said about working a neckline flat when you have something like a complex stitch pattern or something going on. I think it's just easier to do it flat rather than finagling around with short rows. And one thing I really like about the sweater pattern, I feel like it's a sweater pattern that looks more complex than it is. I feel like when I see a sweater with so many cables, I'm like, oh, that must have been a ton of work. It must have been really complicated. But the reality is each of these cables are actually really easy. Like there's no complex cables. You are always working over the same stitches. Hold on, I don't know if I have to move out of the sun. I'm gonna shuffle the camera a little bit. Okay, hopefully that's better and I'm no longer blown out by the sun. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so each of the cables on this sweater are actually very basic cables. You're always working over the same stitches. There's no purling. There's no like one cable is only with 5 stitches, the next cable is with 7 stitches. It's very, very straightforward, very easily memorizable, and yeah, I think it just looks visually more complicated than it actually is to knit. Like if you know how to cable, you can totally knit this sweater. So this is one of the sweaters that there are several versions of this sweater, because I guess it's like a popular design, so Sandisgarn will put it out for different patterns, for different collections, I should say, of yarn. So I am currently knitting this with Sandscorn Atlas, which was gifted to me by Mother Knitter last year. Mother Knitter is like the flagship store for Sandscorn in the US. They also have a store down by the shore. Totally recommend giving it a visit if you are local. They have like every single Sandscorn base in every single color, and a lot of times like through the screen it's hard to tell like what the nuances between the colors are. Like, oh, is this a reddish orange? Is it a bluish orange? Not orange. Is this an orangish red, bluish red? Is it a true red? And just being able to see them in person is really helpful. So Atlas was one of the new releases by Sandscorn last year. So Mother Knitter asked me if I wanted a sweater quantity, and I said, of course, yes. I love Sandscorn yarns. So here we are. And at that time they had also gifted me the Wilbur sweater, which is a pattern by Sandscorn, and they had released an Atlas version for this collection. And then when I went on Ravelry, I saw, oh, they actually already have a free version of this pattern from their tweed collection. I think there's also a men's version, and there might be a kids version, but I'm unsure. All that to say, if you downloaded the free version of this sweater on Ravelry, it is almost nearly identical to the Atlas version. They are knit at the exact same gauge. I think there's just one major difference. So in the Atlas version, all of the cabling is done on the same row. So like this cable, this cable, this cable, this cable, this cable, they're all done on the same rows. Whereas in the free version on Ravelry, they are offset by 2 rows. So I think only like, I think it's like every other cable row is the same for this large cable, and I didn't realize that at first because on my computer I was following the Atlas version, but then when I had been working on this a lot on the train and the subway, I just downloaded the version of Ravelry on my phone, and what I didn't realize is that they had that discrepancy between the cabling rows. It was kind of a headache. I had to like rip out and like drop down and fix all of these really large cables. I don't even want to go into how many hours that took me, but it was worth it. All that to say, if you are using the free version of the pattern, I personally would recommend just modifying what row you do these like large cables on. Just change it by 2 rows so it lines up with every other cable on the sweater, and it looks visually very, very similar, and it's much easier to knit, much easier to keep track of what row you are working at, especially if you use a row counter. I generally don't use row counters a lot. Literally the only time I use a row counter is if I'm knitting cables or lace, because once I've memorized the pattern, I know what to do just based off what row I am knitting on. Otherwise, I don't really find row counters to be particularly fruitful, because I can just like look at my work and count the number of rows. I will say I am a little bit afraid of how this sweater is going to fit. So the way that the pattern is written, every single size starts off with the exact same number of stitches, and the only difference between the sizes is the number of increases you do. So like, let's say I knit size large, so let's say size S would, XS would stop here, S would stop here, M would stop here, L would start here. If you're doing XL, you'll just keep going and going and going. So they all have the same increase rate. And I just am afraid of, if you're not knitting one of the smallest sizes, like how deep is your yoke going to be? So far, mine fit fine, but it is also unblocked, and I know this is going to relax a ton in blocking because there are so many cables in the sweater. So we'll see how that fits. Also, despite every single size starting off with the same exact number of cast on stitches, the number of stitches you pick up for the ribbing is different. And from a lot of people's project notes, they said that the neckline was way too tight, so I did end up picking up way more stitches than the pattern recommends. I believe I wrote in my project notes exactly how many I picked up, and yeah, I don't have a problem of it being too tight. It does have a little bit of like that straight jacket look where it's just like a rigid tall collar, and then there's like space on the side of your neck between where the collar is and where your neck is, which is honestly not my favorite look, but I'm hoping that it relaxes in blocking. Basically, I'm hoping a lot with the blocking for this sweater, and usually I would do a mid project block, but I think like for the first 2 weeks I was knitting this sweater, I was so locked in. I did not want to lock it because I didn't have any other project on the needles. And if I blocked it, I would have nothing to knit on. And then after that, it was like, what's the point of blocking it at this point? Like, the body was done. It is what it is at that point. If it's absolutely terrible, I can always frock it. Such is life. Such is the beauty of knitting. You can always frock it unless you steek it, and even then you can technically still frock it, and you could split splice the yarn if you truly desired, or you could buy a what's that like wheel that people brush the fabric on? I don't know the name because I'm not a spinner, but you could technically, even after you steeked it, you could turn it into new yarn. You could like blend it and spin it up and have new yarn. So that's really one thing I like about knitting, because I've been sewing a little bit more, and sewing is just so permanent. Like, once you make a mistake, you're kind of screwed, especially if you've cut the fabric. Whereas knitting is just so much more forgivable. If you made a mistake, there's usually like 5 different things you could do to fix that mistake. And even if that doesn't work out, you can literally just frog it. That's why I love knitting. Okay, really the only sweater I've been working on for the past month. Oh, and then the yarn that I've been using, like I said, was gifted from Mother Knitter. This is Sanduskarn Atlas, which is a lamb's wool and merino base. It's a non-superwash yarn. There's like stuff on it because, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so it's a lamb's wool and merino blend. It is quite soft. I will say, like, so far in terms of softness, it is nowhere near as soft as Double Sunday, but it's also nowhere near as scratchy as Pure Gant. It's pretty much smack dab in the middle. I do assume that it will soften up a lot in blocking, just from like my previous experience of knitting with lamb's wool, and also like everybody that I've talked to who has knit with this yarn says it does soften a lot in blocking. So I'm looking forward to that. This is the Mystery Musicale. This was the Mystery Knit Along from Stephen West from 2025 in October. So when it first came out, I waited for Clue 1 to drop, and I really liked the look of Clue 1, so I went ahead and I picked all yarns from Stash. I did not purchase any single yarn for the sweater, which was great for, yeah, I was very proud of that. And then I cast it on. I'm trying to look for the section with Clue 1. Where's Clue 1? Okay, Clue 1 are like these, hopefully you can see it with the sun. Clue 1 is this like wavy section, fans, I don't know what to call them. I really liked the look of them, and that's why I cast on this project. I was like generally pretty motivated to knit on it through October, but then after the MCAL was done, I didn't really have interest in that. I've just been like slowly picking it up when I feel like working on it. I'm currently on Clue 4, which there were a lot of parts of this shawl where there were brioche options, and every single time there's a brioche option, there was also a garter stitch alternative, and every single time I picked, sorry, I keep getting like fluff stuck in my lip balm or lip gloss. Every time there was a brioche option, there was also a garter stitch alternative, and I always picked the garter stitch alternative until I came to section 4, which is the last section, and it's basically just like a long border you're knitting straight back and forth, and I thought, okay, maybe I'll knit the brioche section here. I knit 2 rows of brioche stitches, and then I decided to frog it because I was like, I'm never gonna get this done if I do the brioche, and instead I am just going forward with the garter stitch stripes. And at the moment, this is just like my reserved movie knitting. So if I'm going to the movies and I don't have a project I want to work on, then I have been bringing this along, and that's really the only time I have been working on it. Oh no, I lost a stitch. So yeah, that is the shawl. See, when the shawl is in front of me, like in my hands, I feel the urge to knit on it. But when it's not like literally in front of me, I am not thinking of picking it up at all. Like, it is the last thing on my mind that I want to work on this shawl. Okay, I should put this away. I have one last whip, and it is a pair of socks. But yeah, another annoying thing about this shawl is like the amount of ends. Like, look at all that. Look at that. I have to weave that in. When? I don't know. Someday. Okay, my last whip currently just looks like a pair of vanilla socks, but it is a pair of self-drafted socks that I eventually want to add color work to. This is a huge mess. because I have 2 balls of yarn and 2 needles in here. So I cast on these socks, one, because I've been wanting to like make this style for a really, really long time. And number two, I went to go see the drama and I wanted something to knit on. So I quickly cast these on. I did like a very, very short rib because I can't really work on rib in the dark. So I was like, okay, I did 5 rows. That should be good enough. And it is. It's not, I think when I wear it, it will not fold over. So that is that. And the plan is to add a little bow motif on the top of my foot. So we'll see how that goes. And this is what I was talking about, doing fake 2 at a time socks. So with traditional 2 at a time socks, you are using a really long circular needle. However, I find that to be pretty cumbersome, and I also just prefer knitting on short circular needles instead of magic loop. So I just have my 2 balls of yarn. In this case, I am using 250-gram balls because I cannot get a pair of socks out of 1 ball of sisu. And then I have 2 pairs of short circular needles, and I just cast them on at the same time. And I just alternate which one I'm working on. So whichever I have less work on is the sock that I'll pick up. So like currently this sock has less work than this sock. So the next time I work on this project, I will work on this sock to hopefully surpass the progress I've made on this sock. And it's just kind of like a race between the 2 socks, and it keeps me motivated to actually finish the socks, and I don't have to deal with second sock syndrome because I still have single socks from 2024 that I only knit 1 sock and I have not knit the second sock, and I like all those socks, but I would rather cast on new socks than cast on the second sock. So this is my methodology of avoiding second sock syndrome. Okay, that is a wrap. This is actually the second time I've recorded this video this week because the first time I accidentally recorded it in slow-mo. If you made it all the way here, thank you so much for watching, especially if you watched me like before I went on my unplanned hiatus. I greatly appreciate it. Hopefully my next video will not be in 6 months. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching. As always, I would love to know what you are working on while watching this video because I love to be influenced. Maybe I want to make what you are working on. And if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a like and follow along for future videos. Until next time, happy knitting and hope to see you again later. Bye!